Miami's opponent for Friday's second playing opportunity has been set, with the Chicago Bulls mounting an incredible comeback versus the Toronto Raptors after an 0-3 record during the regular season. Can the Heat finally get a win versus Chicago? We review the game versus the Bulls and break down the key matchups, potential X factors, and what Miami has to do to stave off elimination on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, let's do this. Welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So the parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for a green check. Stay in the game with eBay. Guaranteed fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We're recording this after a really fun playing game between the Bulls and the Raptors. The 9-10 game looked like the Raptors were going to roll to a win and play the Heat on Friday, but the Bulls come back from 19 points down. They outscore the Raptors 62-47 in the second half. DeRozan and LaVine combined for 20 points in the fourth quarter. DeMar DeRozan makes some free throws late. They pull the Anthony Davis on Mike Conley with the final seconds. Alex Caruso fouling Pascal Siakam. A little bit of a weird call there. Wasn't sure if it was going to be called on the floor, if they were going to give it to Siakam as a three-point play. They did, but unlike Mike Conley, Pascal Siakam goes 1 for 3 at the line. Game over. Bulls win, completing the comeback, and the Heat are going to play the Bulls at home on Friday to determine who gets the 8th seed, and then obviously a matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks. So, David, what stood out to you about the Bulls as we look ahead to this matchup?
Well, the comeback, obviously, I think that's where you start and end with the story from tonight's game. I prepared my notes early on after Fred VanVleet hit a half-court shot to end the first half. I thought to myself, well, this is it. I don't see Chicago mounting any potential comeback. And, well, sure enough, they did. Zach LaVine caught fire. We'll talk about that shortly because I think that's a key matchup for the game. And Chicago, to their credit, played some tough defense, did everything well, and not so spicy P just couldn't connect on those free throws. I'm not sure what to make of it because I know in our recap of Miami's loss to the Atlanta Hawks, we discussed which team was the more favorable opponent. Right. And given what Atlanta was able to do so easily against Miami, you would think that the overall size and speed and athleticism of the Toronto Raptors would be a more dangerous matchup. But Chicago proved themselves to be a pretty solid team when everything is clicking in place. It has it for them for most of the regular season, but they got it done against the Toronto Raptors. And I'm not sure that they can't get it done against the Miami Heat either.
As you already mentioned, they're 3-0 against the Heat this season, right? And to me, look, part of me feels like the Heat kind of dodged a bullet here because the Raptors were up by 19 points in this game. That's not nothing. They obviously lost the game, and that stinks for them. But, that's a good team that provides a lot of those same issues that Atlanta did in terms of, Jakob Poeltl and Pascal Siakam on that front line, right. The rebounding concerns, a lot of wings to throw at Jimmy Butler, whether it's Anunoby or Scotty Barnes or whoever, and then it's like one Fred VanVleet or Gary Trent Jr. game, yes. And that's it, right? And then the Raptors are playing the Bucks in the first round. But the Bulls, they've had Miami's number this year. DeMar DeRozan, 37 points, 24 points, and 24 points in those 3 meetings. And he's been great all year. I mean, he's borderline All-NBA this season. And so when you look at sort of the swing factor in tonight's game, it was DeRozan and LaVine going off for 20 points in that fourth quarter. DeRozan, 23 points for him in the game on 10 of 19 shooting. LaVine had 39 points in the game. Those guys are really dangerous. The Bulls have a good defense. They're ranked in the top 10 in defensive rating basically all year long. Alex Caruso gives a lot of players problems, as he did Fred VanVleet at times tonight and other players. So that's a good defensive team by rating. Patrick Beverley has given them something. Patrick Williams has sort of developed as the year has gone on. And then if DeRozan and LaVine can kind of get them to pop off offensively, right, then you've got a formidable opponent in front of you, right? And so I think when we were talking about this matchup, it's who guards DeRozan, who guards LaVine, can the Heat keep those guys bottled up? And it kind of starts there. If you could do that, then you give yourself a chance on Friday night.
Yeah, of the two, I've got to be honest with you. I think LaVine is the bigger X factor. We've seen what DeMar DeRozan can do, and certainly he's been dangerous at times versus Miami. LaVine hasn't been all that great against the Heat this season, but I think we saw tonight when he's much more dangerous. Just as an overall shooting threat, he catches fire. He's much more likely to get explosive. DeRozan has that smooth mid-range game. He's going to get his shots. The mid-range, pretty much anywhere from 8 to 19, 20 feet is his dominion. He'll score there almost at will, and he'll get to the line. Very, very savvy. Got that up fake, draws fouls almost as well as Jimmy Butler, perhaps maybe even a little bit better. And still, it doesn't feel like as much of an X factor to me in the sense that you know what his production is going to be like almost on a nightly basis. He's going to be their leading scorer. That's the baseline. Having said that, Zach LaVine, in games where he scores 28 points or more, the Chicago Bulls are now, after tonight, 19-5. So that's a pretty impressive record, showing that when he gets it going, there's so much more dangerous. Just consider the possibility that DeRozan, again, gets to his spots, does what he does almost at will, but LaVine, much more dangerous in the open floor. He can attack, still has an explosiveness towards the basket, even if it's much more limited than it once was. And of course, that heat-checking three-point ability is pretty impressive. He had it going tonight. There were some shots there that he probably shouldn't have taken, but he was making them with ease, especially when he was almost single-handedly leading that comeback in the third quarter.
Yeah, a lot of mid-range shots that he just got the bucket, right? And like LaVine's long, he can shoot over guys, but he's also gotten a lot better at getting to the basket. And a lot of his points just came right in the restricted area tonight against Toronto. I expect Jimmy Butler to probably start on DeRozan. That's basically been the matchup in the 3 times these teams have played. Caleb Martin, when he was starting, he would get shifts on DeMar DeRozan. Usually the Heat have one of those guys on the court. So whenever either it's Caleb Martin or Jimmy Butler on the court on Friday, I expect one of them to get the assignment on DeRozan, which leaves the question, like, who guards LaVine? Because I'm with you. I think that's a really good point. It's a great stat. Like, if he goes off, that makes things a lot more difficult for Miami. You look at Miami's starting lineup. Are you going to put Tyler Herro on him? Are you going to put Gabe Vincent on him? Like, Gabe, you would think, but he's given up LaVine is longer than I think people realize.
Yeah.
And Tyler Herro at least is sort of also like that, longer than people realize. I don't know. They had Herro guarding DeJounte Murray quite a bit in that Hawks game. I wonder if that's something that they go to. I would be a little surprised, but I really don't know what the better matchup is. If the Heat, of course, are rolling out that starting 5 of Gabe, Tyler, Jimmy, Max Strus, and Bam, like, who do you have guarding LaVine?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't think either of them. I mean, you don't have many options. Jimmy Butler is your best wing defender. Of course, you're going to switch out. So you're going to get a lot of LaVine being guarded by Bam Adebayo on multiple occasions. Gabe, almost everybody's going to take their turn, but no one designated defender who can do a really good job of limiting him, keeping him from catching fire. Your best bet, honestly, is probably Caleb Martin. And unless you're inserting him into the starting lineup, which we saw throughout most of the regular season, I don't know if that's something that they would be willing to duplicate.
In a do or die game, that's kind of where I was kind of trying to lead this conversation. It's do or die, and you need your 2 best wing defenders on the court against the 2 best scorers that you're facing in this play-in tournament, arguably, in DeRozan and LaVine. And maybe this is it, man. Like, if you lose this game, the season's over. It kind of feels like whatever you're trying to hold on to in bringing Caleb Martin off the bench, and I get it. I do get it. Like, in a zoomed out view, I understand why you don't want to be starting Caleb Martin. There's trying to stagger him with Jimmy Butler, making sure you have one of those wing defenders on the court at all times, and all these things. But in this specific matchup against a long guy like DeRozan and a long guy like LaVine, I feel like you just need your 2 longest, best defenders out there. And I think Caleb Martin would obviously be ready for it. Like, you and I don't doubt that, right? Like, no. Is he going to stop LaVine? No, I don't think anybody's stopping LaVine necessarily. LaVine kind of does the best job of stopping LaVine at times. But that's your best chance at preventing a big game from Zach LaVine. And you do want to avoid one of those pop-off games from him, to your stat, the point you were making before.
Yeah, I think he's got the athleticism to kind of ride his hip a little bit, check him on occasion, stay with him, move his feet well. If he can avoid foul trouble, I think is the biggest thing, because then if you wind up shooting that shot a little bit too early in the game, obviously if you start him, then who's your next option? Then you've got to roll out Max Strus.
Well, then maybe you start going Haywood Highsmith. Do you make Jamal Cain available? I mean, this is it, man. Like, all hands on deck, dude. Like, this is it. Like there is no sense in saving two-way contracts, days, nothing.
Yeah,
Actually, not even sure how the plan works. Can the two-way guys play in the plan? I'm not even certain of that. But
that's a good point.
that like I don't know. I don't know that Max Strus has earned that starting job. I don't think that he's done anything to convince anybody of saying like, yeah, start that guy for sure.
No.
I think there's a big reason to maybe start Caleb Martin, whether it was Toronto or Chicago for that matter, given how long Toronto is. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense to start Caleb Martin, specifically in this matchup. You could have even went back to the Kevin Love lineup against Toronto, given their size. That's what they did the last time these teams met at the end of March, is you had Love guarding It doesn't matter. They're not playing the Raptors. But against the Bulls, I don't know. I think Caleb Martin does make a lot of sense. X factors, quite a few of them. We talked about the LaVine angle, but there's another big X factor that's going to come on the boards. Rebounding, sticky issue for the Miami Heat lately. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the parts will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply.
Locked On Heat is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please do subscribe. All right, we're going to talk X factors now. We're going to get into later on the road to how the Heat win this game's keys for their win, and we'll make our picks for Friday night's game in a minute. But let's go back to the X factors here. You and I have our notes. I've got X factors. You've got X factors. We've got them for Chicago. We've got them for Miami. Let's start with the Chicago Bulls perspective. The X factors for the Bulls. We remember now that the Heat obviously got crushed on the boards by the Atlanta Hawks. That was the ultimate swing factor in that game on Tuesday. I think it's going to be similar. You know, the Bulls are big. They've got Nikola Vucevic, who historically, whether it's with the Orlando or Chicago, has given Miami fits, especially on the glass. It's a lot of body from Bam Adebayo to handle there, especially if they're starting small. It kind of becomes solely on Bam to battle on the boards. Not only Vucevic, but they're kind of big. Like, they're not the biggest team. They're not as big as Toronto, not even as big as Atlanta. But Miami is so small that basically every team is bigger than them. And so they're going to have their hands full. Rebounding has been sort of a problem lately, not just the Hawks game. And so I know it's sort of unoriginal, but it's the trend line here, right, David, is rebounding. And so I go to my X factor. I think it's Vucevic for the Bulls. If he has a really big game, if he goes off for like 18 and 13, I'm not even talking about like Joel Embiid numbers, but like that could be enough to give the Bulls the edge.
I think we all know what Vucevic is capable of. He has his good nights. He has his very bad nights, and everywhere in between. That's just been a hallmark of his career, is somewhat being inconsistent. He still has 2 trips to the All-Star game throughout his career. He can be pretty dominant at times. Big body, good hands, great passing ability, floor stretching ability. So we'll see what that matchup dictates.
And he's been better defensively this year. Like, the Bulls are a top 10 defensive rating group. Like, he's not great. Like, he's not getting on anybody's all defense ballot.
Right.
But he's been better than what he's been before.
Yeah, it's going to be up to Bam Adebayo to find whatever openings he can, the way he did not against the Atlanta Hawks and their overall speed and athleticism. Vooch, for all of his size, isn't quick enough to really contain
That's
Bam.
The difference between him and Capella. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, Bam's going to get that first step, get the drop step, go in there, try and attack Vucevic as early as possible. If he can get him in foul trouble, that would be ideal. We'll see how it plays out over the course of the game. But yeah, Vucevic is certainly an X factor. I'm glad you brought it up, because I'm thinking along the same lines, but not even from the starting lineup. I've got Andre Drummond as their backup. I think he's still young enough. He's not really athletic or mobile or anything like that, but he's still a big body. He's still a good rebounder. What happens to Miami's bench if they're forced to change their rotation around in order to compensate for DeRozan and LaVine scoring? Do they go with Kevin Love as a backup center? Does Cody Zeller get minutes? There's so many different options, and none of them are ideal. How do you keep Drummond off the boards? He was a factor in Miami's most recent loss to the Bulls. It seems like he's had other moments there throughout the course of the season too against Miami. So not you know, not a superstar player by any stretch, but these are the kinds of things on the edges of, the margins where it's necessary for Miami to be able to control those certain aspects, or at least gain a slight advantage, because otherwise it could become a pretty ugly game, especially when you have the potential scoring in LaVine and DeRozan.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go. That's a perfect transition to the Miami Heat X factors, and I have
Yeah.
Kevin Love / Cody Zeller. It's
Yep.
we might see both of them in the first half, the way that we did against the Hawks, and Spo ended up just saying, you know what, none of you guys are playing that great. I'm playing Bam the entire second half. I don't think that that's a great formula. I think Bam needs some rest. I think that much is clear, is that he's already physically fatigued with how much he's been asked to do this season on both ends of the court. You need one of those guys to step up. You need them to step up against the size of sort of the Chicago Bulls center group. Kevin Love, man, he used to be one of the best rebounders in the league, and now it just sort of feels like he doesn't even jump for him. It's getting to that point in his career. Cody Zeller, I know every Heat fan loves Big Handsome, but he needs to be productive at some point. It's not enough to just set like a really good screen every once in a while in these playing games, right? You need a level of production. I wonder if they throw Ilmar Yurtseven out there. I was wondering that during the Hawks game. If those guys aren't playing well, do you just throw one of the second half is probably too late to do that experiment, but considering that already Kevin Love and Zeller were sort of underwhelming in the first playing game, does Spo have a shorter leash on them and maybe even see some big Yurt minutes in the first half? I don't know. Whatever the backup center spot is and whoever it goes to, those minutes are going to be a key factor for the Miami Heat and potentially an X factor. The other thing, too, is maybe you can get into some lineups with Kevin Love and Bam Adebayo on the court together. And if Kevin Love can do a decent job against Vucevic, who, like you said, he wants to face up for the most part, right? He's got a little post-up stuff to his game. He'll try to bang you a little bit down low, but for the most part, he wants to face up. And I think that's an okay matchup for Kevin Love. And then if he can compete with him on the boards, does that free Bam Adebayo up to play some weak side defense? And then you're maybe starting to take away those basket opportunities, like the at the rim opportunities that LaVine was able to get to tonight against Toronto. And he's able to close out on DeMar DeRozan and that kind of stuff. There's some interesting things here that can happen for the Miami Heat defensively if you could get some level of production out of the backup center group.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point. I hadn't envisioned Love necessarily because I don't know what he's capable of producing on a night-to-night basis. We've seen him have okay nights, maybe even good-ish nights, but he's been so immobile at this stage in his career, and I don't know that that's going to get any better against the Chicago Bulls. Obviously, they're slower and less athletic than the Raptors, so maybe it might trend towards a game where he can have more dominance. And Love has been good. What did I say?
You said
against the Raptors. No, I said against the Raptors because had they faced the Raptors on Friday, it would have been a much worse.
And the Hawks, for that matter, too, though.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're talking about two quick athletic teams. Kevin Love is basically null and void in those matchups. So against Drummond and Vucevic, slower guys, more bigger, more traditional type centers, I think it bodes better for Kevin Love. But he does have to do a good job of keeping them both off the glass. But I like the idea of either Love or Zeller matching up with Vucevic in those minutes so that Bam can play that weak side defense. Because when Vucevic commits, he's going to find a way to score. Despite his great passing ability, he's almost single-minded in that purpose. He's like, okay, I'm going to back down whatever player's on my back. I'm going to try and take him to the hole. He's got good touch around the rim. He uses the backboard well to get that shot off. And so he's probably committing there. That allows Bam, Gabe Vincent, Caleb, whoever's there as the backup defender who can kind of poke the ball free, ignite the fast break offense. That's been such a big part of Miami's offense all season. And so that's just a big part of, I think, a key to winning is being able to force turnovers early on. I've also got Max Strus as an X factor there. His performance against the Hawks was not great, terrible, downright terrible. And I think this isn't as big a deal in the sense that he can't get exploited defensively if he winds up starting and guarding LaVine. But if he comes off the bench, which is a probability or a possibility even at this point, he needs to be able to hit threes. We've just seen what Miami can do when Max has it going. It almost seems like much more free-flowing. There was that one half he had against the Brooklyn Nets a couple of weeks ago. He was sensational, career high in points per quarter. It just looked like Miami was going to be able to cruise to a win, and then he cooled off, and everybody took their foot off the gas. But against Chicago, if he can get it going If he can start knocking down those shots, again, freeing up space for Jimmy to do what he does well, and again, negating what limited athleticism their wing defenders have. They can attack the basket more easily. Bam can get to his points because, again, he can use his speed against Vucevic, Drummond, whoever's out there, and just kind of take away Caruso out of the game. If Caruso, Pat Beverly, whomever has to be able to be drawn out to the three-point line by Max Strus's shooting, that makes so much easier. Things so much easier for Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I mean, for Jimmy and for Bam, I mean, the spacing is everything. That's why they put Max Strus in the starting lineup anyway, and it just didn't work against Atlanta, obviously. And I think the book is out, and I didn't even put Strus on my list of X factors because I just think the Heat have already built a bad reputation offensively. Like, Max Strus isn't going to win this game for the Miami Heat. It's like he's basically getting the PJ Tucker treatment at this point. It's like, what, he's going to make 5 3-pointers? Is that going to win the game for the Heat? Probably not. At best. And so I've got Tyler Herro actually as my X factor because we know that DeRozan is going to get his points. We know to a certain degree that Zach LaVine is going to get his points, whether it's like the big Zach LaVine game or just like sort of a normal average Zach LaVine game is the big difference. But I don't know that Bam is going to get his points anymore. Like he'll probably go out there and score 15 to 17, like kind of like worst case, but like maybe not. I don't know. Like the days of Bam scoring 30, 27 every night, like those are gone. Like that was pre All-Star break Bam. Like there's just not enough space and he's too tired. Yeah. I feel confident enough that Jimmy Butler is going to get his points the same way that DeRozan will. Maybe 60% of them come at the line, but
yeah.
Well, look, if Jimmy Butler has a crappy game, then you're not winning the game. So whatever.
No, right.
So that's sort of like the baseline kind of thing. So in order to just match production for production, Tyler Herro has to have a big game. And he had a big game against Atlanta. He had a great game against Atlanta. So he just has to repeat that. But that to me is sort of the X factor is if Tyler Herro needs to be productive in order for the Heat to stay with LaVine and DeRozan and the rest of the Chicago Bulls. And if Herro's also sort of the guy that breaks defenses, right? When he's got that three-pointer going and stuff, now all of a sudden there's a little bit more space for Jimmy and for Bam. And so that's why I have him as my X factor. We've already sort of hinted at it, how the Heat can get this win. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to make our picks on the other side of this. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. You can reach us on Twitter, Instagram. You can email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. We're going to be back Friday night with our recap of this Bulls Heat game. So make sure that you're tuned in. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Odyssey, everywhere you get your stuff. We are available. FanDuel has the Miami Heat as 4.5-point favorites. We'll make our picks here in a second. But David, when you think about the key to the Heat winning, what stands out to you?
Well, you kind of hinted at it, and you're right that it's very simplistic, maybe even the baseline. But Jimmy Butler has to be great. There's no way around it. Miami's chances increase exponentially when he is the best version of himself. You've always got at least a puncher's chance, if not the opportunity to flat out dominate if he's fantastic. If he has, if not even necessarily an all-time performance, but just the kind of game where he just takes over, whether it's a single quarter or at least consistent production, but there were too many moments where he was just missing easy shots, and then where he eventually wound up getting his 21 points. Again, most of all from hunting for fouls and getting those calls because, well, it's Jimmy Butler. You're going to get that on the other side as well. I mentioned it before with DeMar DeRozan. He's going to get his trips to the line. LaVine can get his trips to the line too, so that's not nearly enough. Jimmy has to be better than what he was against Atlanta. It's a favorable matchup. I think Caruso can be harassing, but I think he's also hurt, and I think he can also be a little foul prone as well because he is so physical as a defender. Jimmy has to be able to take advantage of that opportunity and be a dominant scorer.
They need to attack Zach LaVine. He is still a bad defender. They need to find the soft spot in that Bulls defense in a way that they didn't really do against Atlanta. It just didn't really feel like they attacked Trae Young quite a bit or quite enough, I should say. the one kind of run that the Heat really made, or kind of the 2 runs that they made, or one of them was sort of spurred by Tyler Herro scoring like those 6 points in 90 seconds. And every time, like, Tyler just went right at Trae Young. And I wanted to see more of that. And Zach LaVine isn't as bad as Trae Young, but he ain't great, and it's sort of a similar opportunity for Miami. So if it's Jimmy Butler, if it's Tyler Herro, if it's Bam Adebayo, like whoever it is, you got to go at Zach LaVine and punish him and make him defend and make it hard on him so that he does not become that X factor on offense the way that you outlined before. And so, yeah, I think to me, when I'm thinking about the keys, it's Jimmy Butler. It's him not missing a bunch of shots he usually makes right at the basket. And it's him being aggressive and setting that tone early. It's Bam Adebayo getting the ball more often, to his point that he, like he said at the end of after the Hawks game, in space, and other guys making shots. Like, it's not rocket science. The Heat win when they make 3-pointers, because all of a sudden you can't cheat off of those guys, and you can't start triple teaming Bam, and now he's getting to the basket and he's able to kick out and create opportunities for others. And instead of seeing 3 bodies and turning the ball over, he's seeing one body and maybe a second one a little bit late, and then he's kicking out to an open shooter, and that guy's making the shot, and it's a very different result for the Heat offensively. And so, they need to make shots.
No, I've also got Miami having to establish a big lead early on. We just saw what happened with the Toronto Raptors again.
Bigger than 19?
Yeah. I mean, that's not likely given Miami's limitations on offense, but as any cushion to withstand the inevitable ignitability. So coming back to haunt you, buddy, the ignitability of LaVine and or DeRozan, who are going to be able to get their buckets down to stretch. LaVine maybe a little less likely than DeRozan, but a 15-point lead, just anything, because you've seen Miami's style on offense or just their regular gameplay. They wind up, having to come back from behind because they don't get their shot going early on. Their offense kind of discombobulates. They make a run as they did against the Atlanta Hawks, fall short because it's just not nearly enough. If Chicago gets it going early on, if they're confident, they feel like they come into Miami the same way they came into Toronto and said, you know what, we're going to take over this game and pencil our way into the playoffs, regardless of who the opponent is. Miami needs to be able to establish a cushion early on so they can withstand that, and then let Jimmy take over the game and be the closer he thinks he can be. That's basically it.
A lot of confidence for the Bulls, right? They go into Toronto, they win in Toronto in a do or die playing game, because for them it was do or die. And now you come into Miami, a team you've already beaten 3 times this year. They have not beaten you all year. A lot of reasons for confidence for the Chicago Bulls. And yet, David, FanDuel has the Miami Heat as 4.5-point home favorites in this one. What's your pick in this?
I can't pick Miami to win. All season long, I think it's been pretty clear that I've been, if not necessarily optimistic, I have always thought that there was another gear that a team led by Jimmy Butler could reach. And I just don't know that that's something this group is capable of anymore, whether it's something that's wrong with the personalities, the problems in offense, the roster construction, so many different factors that have made this season so difficult for this team to carve out wins. And they just don't seem to have the joy, the zest, even just the desire to challenge teams, to punch them in the face, to win. They've had 1, 2, 3 games that I can remember over the course of the whole season where they were like, all right, this is a Heat identity. This is a Heat-like team that takes on all comers. There was the win against the New York Knicks, and then they wind up crapping the bed the next game over. Like, they've just done it so many times over and over again that I can't look at this Heat team and think that they're going to find a way to win. I think they want the season to end so they can just wrap it up, because I know consciously they don't. But subconsciously, I think they're just tired right now, and they need an injection of some kind of energy, something different in that locker room, whether it's a huge change or a minor change or a few minor changes. We'll see during the offseason. But I don't think they can find what's necessary to beat a Bulls team that, again, is playing with house money and is feeling all the confidence in the world, and rightfully so.
There might be less motivation for them to go on and advance to a series against the Milwaukee Bucks as opposed to a rematch against the Boston Celtics, too. I think that this team isn't dumb. I think that they speak with confidence in front of cameras a lot. I thought that confidence even then has waned a little bit. Jimmy Butler has gone from we're going to win to we're going to kind of do what we got to do. And like, we're going to do our best to play well. And like, it's kind of like the messaging has changed a little bit if you're paying attention. And yeah, I don't understand why this line is 4.5 points. I didn't understand why the Hawks line was 5 and it ultimately climbed to 5.5. Like I have no reason to think that the Heat are that good, and I've said this before, but outside of Jimmy and Bam, you stack up 3, and I like Tyler Herro. You know that. I'm kind of in the bag for him. Like even 3 through 10, 3 through 8, it's among the worst group in the NBA. Like just from a talent perspective. Like the fact that they've even gotten the 7th seed is a minor miracle. And I know a lot of Heat fans don't want to hear that. And there's a lot of blame, all this, whatever. This is not a talented team. I thought the Hawks were really deep. And I said, don't overlook them. And I think the Bulls are pretty deep. And I'm telling you not to overlook them either. In terms of a pick, I don't think that the Heat cover that 4.5. I'll put it that way. I don't think they cover that 4.5.
Can here's one thing that we didn't talk about, and I think is a big factor moving forward. Can Kyle Lowry duplicate what he did against the Hawks on Wednesday?
You trust him to do it two times in 1 week?
I do not.
Was that the last kind of gasp by Kyle Lowry? I don't know. Like that's also been the whole idea, sort of working your way. He's probably another X factor we didn't mention. Yeah. Was the whole point of managing his minutes was that so he can do this every other night? Like I don't know, but I'm not counting on him going out and scoring another career high with the Miami Heat.
Certainly not that. Like even if it's just a 20+ point per game outing from him, that would be probably enough. It wasn't on Tuesday, but he was also supposed to take a 5-day break in between Tuesday's game and Saturday's matchup against the Celtics.
Right.
Had he find a way to carry them to victory.
That's probably what he was trying. That's probably what he was gunning for. He probably just unloaded the clip, right? Thinking like, I don't want to play again on Friday. I'd rather play Saturday.
If Chicago comes and punches Miami in the face early on, which is certainly a possibility, I don't know that this team has enough, just whatever, fight in them left.
Or whatever. Yeah. I don't think that this team, all right, to kind of review, I think they have to make a change to the starting lineup. I don't see I don't see how they match up against the Bulls going super small. Unless they think that, unless Max Strus comes out, shoot around in warmups, and is just making 200 straight 3-pointers, there is no reason that I see for them to stick to that starting lineup. I'm going to go with the Bulls. I'm going to go with the Bulls too. Unfortunately, this might be the end of the Heat season. Would be happy to be proven wrong. I think. I don't know. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. A reminder, we will be back here Friday night after the game from the arena where it all goes down. If the Heat win or if the Heat lose, we will come back to you with a recap of the game and what happens next. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. David, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
And also listening to me.
Yeah, sure. Why not?